What do inflammation and oxidative stress have in common? They're present at alarming levels in people with disorders such as Parkinson's and Huntington's disease. Conventional medicine is convinced that vitamin and antioxidant therapies don't work. But our guest, Dr. Kedar Prsad, author of Fight Parkinson's and Huntington's with Vitamins and Antioxidants, will tell us how clinical trials are designed to fail. And he gives us a specific protocol for best possible outcomes, even when there's a genetic component involved.
Meet Gina. Gina wanted to lose weight, so she spent 2 years fasting, detoxing, and dabbling with vegan diets while practicing a shit ton of yoga to lose 25 pounds. But it took so long that nobody noticed. Then, Gina started Frenching her food by eating fatty cheeses, butter, sausages, and red meat, and lost 15 more pounds in only 2 months. Everybody noticed this time. Frenching your food unlocks the riddle of weight loss that skinny French chicks use to slim down, look young, and live longer despite doing everything wrong. Be like Gina. Start Frenching your food today by visiting nutritionheretic.com/Frenching.
Fat is bad for you.
I just pop a pill and I'm fine.
Meat is murder.
It's time for bad food punishment. It's time for real nourishment. It's time for the Nutrition Heretic.
The following program is provided as information only and may not be construed as medical or health advice. It is not intended to diagnose, treat, or cure any disease. No action or inaction should be taken solely on the basis of the information provided here. Please consult with a licensed healthcare professional or doctor on any matter relating to your health and well-being.
Hello and welcome to the Nutrition Heretic podcast with Adrienne Hugh, the Nutrition Heretic. And today I'm introducing... That is Nikola Popovich, my my trusty co-host and audio editor.
You beat me to the punch.
Well, so to speak. Anyway, Nikola will probably be on many episodes, if not all episodes going forward, because like me, he also has a family of young children who interrupt and show up and don't want to go to bed when it's time to go to bed. But, you know, our plan is to have him here as much as possible going forward. Today, we are going to be tackling a subject that has come up often for me. Yes, in practice, but also in just regular life. As a matter of fact, I was at a party a couple of weeks ago with a woman who had these tremors, and she was vegan. She was allergic to like 500 foods. She was, I made a dessert and she says to me, "So does it have gluten in it?" I was like, "No." "Does it have milk in it?" "No." "Does it have strawberries in it?" "No." And we went down a list of at least like 20 foods. And she's like, "Really? It doesn't have any of that in there?" And I said, "Really?"
So what does it have?
It had coconut milk, tapioca, sweet potatoes,
And plywood.
coconut sugar, and just some other like root vegetables and things. I think it had a little taro. It's called momo cha-cha. It's from Malaysia, and I had learned about it from a friend of mine who's Malaysian or Malay. I used to work with in New York, so every once in a while I make this dessert this was in particular, it was for a luau. So I was like, hey, perfect. It's, totally fits in. And luckily I did make it because that was the first time she had been to a party since she had her own party that she was actually able to eat something because it didn't have any of what she has as allergens. But, when we were talking, she's telling me, and she looks totally deficient. Her body seems extreme. She seems very dry, like super thin, way more wrinkly than she should be for her age. And she is saying how, when she does eat fat, the little bit that she gets it from olive oil. And this was something that I had started to notice. And she's got these tremors. She's shaking. And I have been noticing this over the years. People come to me, whether it's, like I said, professionally or in just, in my community, and they've got these tremors, but they're touting this super politically correct diet. Most of them are on the vegetarian, vegan side, and they're all telling me that they consume all of this olive oil, and it's so good, and I just bathe myself in olive oil. Oh, olive oil, it's so good. So, today we're going to talk to our guest heretic, who is Dr. Kedar Prsad. He is a PhD in radiation biology from the University of Iowa. At least that's where he got his degree. And he has associations with several cancer therapy groups. And he also has written a book called Fight Parkinson's and Huntington's with Vitamins and Antioxidants. So with that, explain to us the differences between Parkinson's and Huntington's disease.
Yeah, Parkinson's disease is acquired disease, and this affects the different part of the brain. For example, where there is a dopamine neuron. On the other hand, Huntington disease is a genetic disease that you inherit from your parent, and the children at least have a 50-50 chance of developing Huntington disease if the parent has that particular gene defect. And that gene defect is called, a technical name is a CAG, C-A-G, CAG, which codes for the amino acid glutamine. So normally, this Huntington protein normally is very important for your health and for your development. But when it get mutated, when mutation occurs, and then they expand this CAG. So instead of, say, repeat that generally we have in Huntington up to 35 repeats of this particular glutamine amino acids in the protein, but in Huntington disease, it can increase up to 100 such amino acids in one protein.
Whoa, okay.
And so this is inherited disease. So main distinction is not only that one is acquired, and in some cases could be genetic too in Parkinson's disease, but there is a different genes. But in Huntington disease is always, and it is also a movement disorders. It is a jerky movement and all kind of, and there is no cure for it. So, but main difference is most of the Parkinson is acquired during your lifetime. On the other hand, Huntington disease is inherited from your parent.
Okay, and then what are the manifestations of each? I know that the Parkinson's, we think of the tremors mostly. What other symptoms?
Yeah, I mean, tremors, you have rigidity, you have later on you develop dementia, and you can control. So main is the rigidity and tremor, what is called involuntary tremor. And later on you develop dementia, you develop a problem of taste, smell, and this kind of thing. Those are advanced stages of the Parkinsonism. And this Huntington is also very progressive, and it has also kind of at random jerky movement, and like in the face twitching type of movement. And they progress rapidly, and then people can't take even a glass of water, and eventually they die. But this is a long-term death, does not occur quickly, and therefore it is a very, very terrible disease. But important thing is that many factors, the disease looks different, but some of the biochemical defects that are found in the brain is very similar. That causes damage to the various area of the brain is very similar.
Right. But yeah, actually, I want to get to some of those similarities, but what's coming up for me right now is something that has touched our family because my mother-in-law just died of multiple complications of multiple sclerosis. How closely is that related to these diseases? Because a lot of what you're describing, the involuntary movements, or at least lack of control of movement, and the not being able to even sip a glass of water, those types of things are coming up as being very similar. How closely is it related?
Yeah, I think, for example, MS is a neuromuscular disease, but here is what causes all these kind of issues,
Right.
whether it's a genetics or what is acquired in case of Parkinsonism. The increased production of free radicals
Yes.
are the most important culprit and common to all these three diseases that you mentioned. And when nerve cell damage gets damaged by free radicals, they initiate inflammatory reactions that cannot be healed. So then inflammation reaction started producing a lot of toxic chemicals, and that further damage. So there are two things. First, increase production of free radicals in the brain that then causes inflammation, which further produces damaging or harmful chemical that will damage nerve cell. And third is a glutamate, because glutamate, as you know, is amino acids and it is a neurotransmitter. But if you release a lot of glutamate, you have a fear, you have anxiety, and that is again common to all these three diseases that you mentioned at the later stage of the development. So it is very important to remember that these three diseases that you mentioned looks very different from the symptoms point. Well, in some symptoms are clearly different. Some are very common.
Yes.
But the biochemical defects that initiate and promote these defects are very similar.
Right.
And therefore, if you can reduce these defects simultaneously, you can affect all these disease processes. And not only that, in terms of prevention, but also in combination with a standard care that is given to all these people, you can improve their effectiveness and prolong their effectiveness, not only effectiveness, but prolong the effectiveness. And the reason it is very important that even though, like in Huntington chorea or say in Parkinson's disease, some 10% of the Parkinson disease is also inherited from parent, but 90% are acquired. But those who inherited from a parent, whether it is a Huntington disease or the Parkinson disease, if you measure the individuals who have not developed the disease but parent had it, but they have not developed any symptoms of the disease, when they analyzed their blood, they found that the level of free radical damage was much higher, level of inflammation was much higher. So even the asymptomatic individuals who have not developed these symptoms, but carrying the defective or mutated genes of their parent, you can see that they also have a increased free radical production and increased inflammation. So if you can prevent in those people, whether it's any Huntington or Parkinsonian, you can delay the onset or prevent the onset of the symptom of the disease for a longer period of time. Generally, genetic disease, which you inherited from parent, appear around 35 to 45 years of age.
Okay.
So this is very important to remember that many of these diseases, biochemical defects are very similar, except they affect different part of your brain.
Right. And what I like about what you're saying is that it's not a death sentence.
No.
Because there's too much focus, in my opinion, in mainstream medicine where they say, your mother had breast cancer, you're going to have breast cancer.
Exactly.
So, and this type of thing. So, your parents have it, you're going to manifest it. And it's almost like they try to rig it so that no matter what, you're going to end up with it. And in fact, there are strategies that we can take. Now, you talked about the excitatory effect of glutamate. Explain the relationship between glutamate or glutamic acid and GABA.
Yeah. It is, they have opposite function. Glutamate is an excitatory neuron. It excites,
right.
It creates anxiety, creates fear. And GABA is the inhibitory transmitters. So it inhibits the effects of glutamate. So if your glutamate is being released in excessive amount, and say at the same time, GABA is also released at the same time, they can block the action of glutamate. So they balance each other so that your neurological function maintains normal. You don't get excited. And that's why in many diseases, especially the people who have anxiety disorder, like for example, in PTSD, one of the treatment is that they give a glutamate antagonistic as a treatment, but of course they are very toxic. But I will tell later on that there are nutrients which can prevent the release of glutamate as well as their toxicity. And so those are very important issues. But that's the main difference, is that one is creates excitement, another is inhibitory. They calm down, so they balance the function of each other, and therefore you remain stable.
So would you say that glutamate is equivalent to what might be going on with someone who has a very type A personality? They need to control everything and they're very tense all the time.
Yeah, intensity. Yeah, it could be a little bit fighting more glutamate. I don't know. But personality A could be different. But, people who are anxiety type of people, who get anxious easily, they are the one most culprit in terms of more susceptible to a glutamate type of excessive release. And then, and then when they calm down, that means the GABA is released and they balance it out. Right. But in chronic diseases, they keep going. The GABA is also downregulated, gets decreased, and therefore the glutamate has a free hand in terms of creating anxiety, fear, and damage to the nerve cell.
Right. Well, one of the reasons I asked that is because one of the guests that we have coming up in a few weeks is Julia Ross, who wrote The Mood Cure and The Diet Cure, and she talks about when she first got her experience of someone coming in. I want to say it was a couple that came into her office, and one was really tense and the other one was really relaxed, and she gave them each the opposite of what they were. And the one who took the GABA was like calm by the time he left. And the other one was a little more energetic and focused when they left. People might be interested in listening to that in a few weeks. But you talk about the fact that neither of these cross the blood-brain barrier. This is something we hear about a lot, but I'm not sure that many people really understand what the blood-brain barrier is and what the significance is of these two amino acids not crossing that barrier.
Yeah, this is a glutamate. We don't know why it is not the case, but blood-brain barrier is in a way to protect your brain from exogenous toxic chemicals that might go. So it acts as like a skin in your hand, protects your body. And so blood-brain barrier is analogous to a skin that filter out any bad stuff. But GABA is a molecule that they cannot, for some reason, they cannot, they don't know why, they can't cross the blood-brain barrier. Therefore, GABA supplement, what they do they use a precursor like drug, stimulate the receptor of GABA. These are all pharmacological, drug type of things they use for the treatment of, say, for example, anxiety disorder. But that is very also toxic. All these medications that will elevate the brain level of, say, GABA or decrease the brain level of glutamate, they are very toxic. They have a side effect, but doctor titrate in a way that has minimal toxicity. But I will tell you some more non-toxic way of doing it, but people are not paying attention to. And we were telling the story of medical establishment. They're afraid of word micronutrient or antioxidant. It is very surprising.
Right, absolutely. And I, over the years, I have seen doctors who really, and it's really out of their fear because they haven't been trained. They don't know what these nutrients are, but they actually will tell patients, you don't want to do that. You don't know what you're going to get. And that's actually a lot of the story that my mother-in-law got from her doctors. And this was and we're just talking about moving from boxed food to real food. And they were scaring her from eating food that had not been processed in a can or a box. Yeah.
I think one story probably maybe you already know. how the sometimes advancement of science is delayed by the medical establishment. And one story was that that I think I have written in the book, but that in early 15th or 16th century, when the people used to come to explore this side of the ocean by ship, and the crews used to get sick and all kind of a skin disease. So one of the ship, captain of the French ship, landed, had a terrible skin lesions, a skin disease, and he could not, just tolerate it. So he landed in Canada and went to the native Indian, it is, you remember, 1500th century, native Indian doctor. And native Indian doctor gave the juice or extract of the spruce tree, spines of the spruce tree.
Yes, like the sap.
Yeah, like sap, yeah. And his disease was cured.
Right.
So he was very excited. He went to France and started saying that I have brought this juice that can cure all the skin disease of the sailor, and we will not have any skin disease. So the French establishment said, no, you brought this thing from the savages. We don't believe in any of those things. And turned out that juice was very rich in vitamin C.
Exactly.
But it took about 300 that a skin disease at that time, what we call now a scurvy,
exactly,
would have been cured 300 years earlier if the French establishment would have promoted that, and then discovery of vitamin C would have been much earlier than in, say, in the late 90s or early 90s. So there are many examples of like that how establishment don't want to believe, which makes sense and which is like almost like a common sense. But it is the story that I have to fight all my years, and then we have some success,
Right. So tell me about that, because one of the things that you talk about is basically the piss poor levels of antioxidants that are being used in clinical trials. Because we love to turn on the news, right? We love to turn on the news and vitamin E doesn't work. It might actually be dangerous for people with this or that disease, and we don't take vitamin A, and they kind of They promote these like one-shot solutions because, of course, your body's completely breaking down because there's only one thing missing. There's only one nutrient, and that's going to miraculously fix everything.
Here is the thing, that if you give this question, and I will give you one study examples, and then I will give you my own views. One, if you give these three things to a high school, senior high school, junior high school kid, they will say, don't do the experiment. For example, you remember the trial that was done in Harvard with beta carotene alone.
I vaguely remember that one. I know they've done a lot of very suspect studies at Harvard.
Yeah, beta carotene alone was given to a heavy smoker.
Oh, yeah, I do remember this, yeah.
They wanted to see if beta carotene reduced the risk of lung cancer. And the idea was that beta carotene was in the experimental system, animal model system, not among a smoker, so some evidence that might reduce the risk of cancer. But human is different, that, we have cured many diseases in rat and mice. Exactly. But when it comes to human, that is much more complex. But anyway, so here is the issue. If you tell the students that the heavy smoker have a high oxidative environment in their body, in other words, they are producing a lot of free radical in the body, and they have been measured, and many papers have been published to support that. That's one. Second, if you tell them that beta carotene or any individual vitamin E or beta carotene, say in this case beta carotene, when beta carotene is exposed to high oxidative environment, like in a heavier smoker, they get oxidized, very well known, quickly oxidized. Then they act as a pro-oxidant, like free radicals, rather than as an antioxidant. Then they will say, would you like to start that experiment? They will say no, because you will have a opposite effect. Beta carotene, instead of acting as a antioxidant, will act as a free radicals or pro-oxidant, and that will increase the risk of lung cancer. And in this is what they found. They found that beta carotene supplementation alone increased the risk of lung cancer by 17%. And there was huge publicity that don't take beta carotene. Most of the chronic diseases that we have, whether it's a Parkinson's or Alzheimer or Huntington, they have a high internally inside the body. A lot of free radicals are produced, a lot of inflammation are being produced. And under that kind of condition, if you just give one antioxidant, any beta carotene or vitamin E, is not going to work.
Right. Right, exactly. And this is one thing that I see constantly with people. They've got a bunch of stuff going on with them. And even if they don't have something that looks as, let's just call it scary, or intense, let's say, as a Parkinson's or Huntington's disease, they'll scour the internet and then they'll find that beta carotene. We're just going to stick with that example, and they'll try it, and then they'll come back and they'll say, oh, my symptoms got worse. And I'm thinking to myself, how can you possibly think that it's only that one thing that you have to do?
Yeah, exactly.
And
exactly.
what's even more baffling is that some of these people will take 10 medications, but when it comes to supplements, they're like, oh, well, I want to get it from real food. And not that they're even eating real food. Most of them aren't eating real food, but when they, but they're very resistant to the therapies that actually might build the body up versus these drugs that really are just trying to minimize symptoms. And sometimes they're minimizing symptoms by sacrificing other systems in the body.
Exactly. That's correct. Here is the concept that I have been pushing for the last few years. For example, and again, this makes it common sense if you look at our body has a defense system against free radicals, inflammation. We have two components, two parts of defense system our body has. One is called antioxidant enzymes, for example, catalase, superoxide dismutase, glutathione peroxidase, antioxidant enzymes. They protect against free radical damage. That's one. Second thing is we have also antioxidant that we take from the diet. Right. For example, A, C, E, dietary. And third is that some antioxidant we made ourselves. For example, glutathione our body makes it, L-carnitine our body makes it, coenzyme Q10 our body makes it. And when oxidative stress occurs in your body, producing a lot of free radicals, a lot of inflammation. Not only antioxidant enzyme goes down, but also antioxidant that we take from the diet goes down, antioxidant that we make in our body goes down.
Right.
So the question is that in order to have an optimal reduction in oxidative damage as well as in inflammation, one has to increase the level of antioxidant enzymes as well as diet antioxidant as well as endogenous or body-made antioxidant at the same time. Yes. You have to increase at the same time in order to have a decent effect for whatever your optimal health, your immune system, your disease, whatever your health conditions is. But if you just elevate antioxidant enzymes but ignore the other one, it is not going to work. If you just elevate a dietary antioxidant and it is not going to do the job. So one can say that we can, by supplementation, you can easily buy these things or make a formulation of these things that have an antioxidant that we take from the diet and antioxidant that we take from that our body makes it. But how do you increase the level of antioxidant enzymes? The one way is normally in our body, like when we do aerobic exercise or any kind of exercise, then there is a what is called a nuclear transcription factor called NRF2, NRF2.
Okay.
NRF2. this NRF2 when require free radicals to activate it. And once this get activated, then it goes to the nucleus and bind with some another protein there and elevate the antioxidant enzymes. So normally, if you're a healthy person, then NRF2 get, anytime you have a little bit extra free radicals, they get activated, antioxidant enzymes goes up, it takes care of that. And at that time, short term, the level of dietary and endogenous or body-made antioxidants are not down. So this is okay. But what happens when you have a disease like Parkinsonism or Alzheimer or any disease you take it, chronic diseases, neurological diseases, they don't respond to free radicals. They don't respond to oxygen. NRF2 becomes inactive. So you have to find out some way to activate that. Otherwise, you are not going to increase the antioxidant enzyme, and that is very important in order to reduce the oxidative stress.
Right.
But many people have done a lot of research showing that certain antioxidant, only thing we know about antioxidant, it destroys free radical, which is true. But antioxidant can also activate NRF2 without the need for free radicals. It just activates it.
I see.
And therefore, that's why it is very important that in order to have a reduction in your oxidative damage and inflammation, you have to have a micronutrient preparations which can do both. It can increase the antioxidant enzymes by activating NRF2, as well as enhance the level of dietary and body-made antioxidant at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
So this is extremely important. Then there is another issue of glutamate. How you take care of glutamate also. You have to take care of glutamate as well. Now, some research data shows that the vitamin B is extremely important, and certain antioxidants like coenzyme Q10 and vitamin E, they will not only prevent the release of the glutamate, excessive release, but also if some glutamate have been accumulated in the brain and then they will cause toxicity, they will prevent the toxicity of glutamate. So it has a double function. So if you have a combination, it has very double function, namely that it prevents the release as well as prevents the toxic effect of glutamate on the nerve cell. I mean, if you put all this together, this looks like a very common sense to try.
Right.
For your their health or, for disease prevention or any, we are not questioning the standard care. We are simply saying, if you combine this with your standard care, then it will be very nice to have.
Right. Then the patient outcomes are possibly going to be enhanced because you're actually addressing the foundational level.
That's right. Because most of the drugs, prescription drugs, are developed based on the symptoms of the disease, not the causes of the disease.
Right.
And therefore, what happens, for example, take the example of a Parkinson disease. The classical or gold therapy is called dopa therapy.
Right. For the dopamine levels.
To increase the dopamine level. That's a standard treatment. But what happens? This treatment relies that your dopamine neuron has to be alive in the brain. Otherwise, dopa would not get converted to dopamine and it would not work. But dopa cannot prevent the causes of the death of the nerve cell. For example, it does not affect free radicals or oxidative damage. It does not affect chronic inflammation. It does not affect glutamate. And these are the major reasons why dopamine neurons are dying. So what happens consequently, dopa therapy will be like magic for 5 years, 6 years, and then patient becomes worse.
Right.
And because the dopa neurons are dying, once the neurons are going to die, is not there, dopa cannot work. At that point, actually, dopa becomes very bad because dopa will get oxidized and generates excessive amount of free radicals. That's how you see many Parkinson patients at the end of dopa therapy after 5 or 10 years. Generally, average is 5 years, and they become worse. Their symptom becomes terrible.
Right.
And so if you combine with this kind of approach, micronutrient approach with dopa therapy, then neuron will be alive, dopamine neuron will be alive for longer period of time, and therefore dopa therapy will work for longer time without causing any side effects.
Right, right. See, two things come to mind while you're talking here. First is there seems to be a similarity, and tell me if I'm wrong, between what you're discussing and what maybe more people are more not comfortable, but have more experience with or know a little bit more about, which might be insulin levels, where the pancreas eventually gets exhausted. You know, it keeps up this charade, and then it gets exhausted, and it just can't produce the enzymes needed to do its job properly, right? And that's when you start getting into these diabetic states.
Yeah.
The other thing is that what I'm understanding you are saying is that, and this is what I've often believed about a lot of these conditions, is that you can do the conventional therapy to make the patient feel comfortable.
Yeah.
But in the meantime, you address that underlying thing that will give you the longer term results that you want, and possibly even heal the person to a state where they're no longer dependent upon the symptomatic therapy, or
Exactly.
at least they don't have to take it as often.
Yeah. I think that's very important. You mentioned in diabetes cases, again, or if you look the literatures, all the diabetic related complications, neuropathy, nephropathy, kidney damage, this limb, all these things are related to oxidative damage and inflammation.
Exactly.
And none of the drug, including insulin, and the cell, I will tell you, none of the drug that they use to control glucose level has any effect either on the level of free radicals or on the level of inflammation. So by controlling glucose, the rate of the progression of the disease slows down, but not completely blocked. Eventually they become resistant and so on and so forth. But and there are several, in my experience, that's one of the company that is marketing a product that I developed. And they said that some people who were on a 4 or 5 diabetic medications, and when they took it, and after 3 months, 6 months, the doctor started reducing their medication dose, and finally they are on a very small amount of diabetic medication like insulin. And so again, this is very important that if you control these oxidative damage, if you control inflammations, you can improve the diabetic situation remarkably well. Because, for example, in a type 2 diabetes, insulin are being produced, but insulin become resistant.
Exactly, because you're exhausting the cells, and it seems that all of the therapies that they're giving to people are focusing on that last stage where the cells are already working as hard as they can to keep you alive, and they're really just addressing the dopamine or the insulin at the end. Yeah. As opposed to, like was said before, working from the ground up. So you're really just making the cells more and more tired because you're trying to, it's almost like they're trying to force them to uptake the nutrients that they're just like, look, if I could take it, I would make it, for crying out loud.
For example, in case of insulin, you have a cell, you have an insulin receptor, and they get receptor is a protein, they get damaged by free radicals. So cell says, I can't pick up you, no matter how much insulin give me. I don't have a way to pick up.
Right.
But you prevent the damage, and and if you reduce the oxidative damage, and new receptors are being formed. So maybe when now new receptor comes, insulin receptor, they don't get damaged, and then you will improve it. So there is a lot of science behind these kind of approaches that if you can reduce oxidative damage and inflammation, you can have a very good health, even healthy aging, what I call, with a minimal type of discomfort while you are growing.
Right. What I'm wondering is, do you need any clarification on the relationship between, like, what oxidative stress means and, like, the relationship between that and oxygen?
Yes, sir, please.
Yeah.
Because I'm thinking of oxidation as rust.
Right. It is rust. But what happens, for example, oxygen obviously is very important for you. But when you use, even normally what we breathe oxygen from the air, it has so much, and then brain uses and all our body. But brain uses proportionally 25% of respired, what you oxygen you breathe, 25% is used by brain, even though it represents only 5% of the body weight. So proportionally, it uses a lot of oxygen. And while doing so, because an oxygen is needed to generate energy by the mitochondria, which generates energy. And it uses so much oxygen, you just absorb so much oxygen that 2% of the oxygen that it takes leaks out and generates extensive amount of free radicals. And when we say oxidative damage or oxidative stress, it implies that the amounts of free radicals that are being produced are much more than your own antioxidant defense system can handle it. So it surpasses that. And that's why we suffer oxidative damage. So brain is exposed to very high level of free radicals every day. And some people have estimated that normally after the age of 20 years, we lose normally about 1,000 nerve cells every minute.
Oh, God. I'm doomed.
And no, I'll give you some good news.
This explains a lot, actually.
Yeah, I think this explains Homer Simpson.
Yeah. And brain has about 1 billion neurons. However, brain has developed a functional plasticity. In other words, you have to lose 70% of the neuron before any clinical symptoms of a disease appears. So brain can function normally with a fewer neuron. So that is a good news. And maybe that's why, and an interesting thing is that if the brain is producing so much free radicals, you would have thought that nature would have provided a high level of antioxidant in the brain. Opposite is true. Brain has the lowest level of antioxidant protection against free radicals. On the top of that, brain has the highest level of unsaturated fatty acids, which are easily damaged by free radicals. So brain has all the things against it.
Why? Okay, why do you think that's true? Because I've always heard that there's a higher percentage of cholesterol and saturated fats.
Saturated fatty acids. I'm talking about unsaturated.
Right. Yeah, acids. I know, but you said it's got the highest level, and
level. Yeah, cholesterol is also part of the membrane.
Right.
But if you take a total fatty acid, measure it, then the unsaturated fatty acid is the highest level.
Why do you think that? How does that help us evolutionarily? Like, what do you think? Well, I mean, what do you think God was saying when He did that?
Because the membranous structure, it has 1 trillion of synapses,
right,
which are all membranous structure, really, to communicate with various part of the brain. I mean, that's very good questions. Evolutionary, I think we developed these things because we needed much more synapses. And as you know, synapses is very important to have to store in the memory and communication and all kind of things that synapse does. And so for having number of synapses so many, we needed it in order to think, process it, informations, think and express and so on. And maybe that's the reason we have so much unsaturated fatty acid and some saturated fatty acid too. Cholesterol is extremely important for brain function.
Right.
It was someplace in epidemiology studies showed that people who have extremely low cholesterol, they can become violent.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I see that actually quite a bit. Now, when I opened up the show, I talked about these people who come to me and they've got the tremors and they love their unsaturated oils. They're in particular their olive oil, and they're like, oh, I use it on everything. And they eat, most of them actually are vegetarian and, on a super low fat diet, and the little bit of fat that they actually get is usually from olive oil. They eat a high fiber diet, which is something that you do recommend. But I'm finding that this seems to be the norm of the people who have, in my experience, I'm just talking about the people who talk to me, who have Parkinson's. What's your rationale? What do you see?
I'm surprised that olive oil will do it, because generally olive oil is, at least some of the published paper is supposed to be good for you because it's unsaturated nature.
Right.
But again, if you use excessive amount of anything, you go extreme, then you have a problem. Especially with Parkinsonism, for example, excessive exposure to pesticides, herbicides, fungicides that we spray in our yards, and a certain solvent, and another is a recreational drug. There is a chemical called MPTP, is a big name, but this is impurity in a recreational drug that people use it, and that can cause Parkinson's disease as well.
Right.
This is a good chance for me to cut in, all right? So between you two big bullies, there's nothing that I can really say, but here and there about the olive oil. So I live in the Mediterranean, and the olive oil is, of course, naturally a staple here. But there is a very big... I must say there's a very big difference between the countries that I had the chance to see the process, because the use of the pesticides here is not it's not natural for us. It's not something that we tend to do. We leave our olives untouched and without any chemicals, and I tasted some various sorts and various brands of oil, that you can buy on stores just for sample purposes.
Right.
And also various samples from our homemade manufacturers. So in here, it's like a tradition. You have every household that makes its own olive oil. And the difference is, like night and day. You can't taste anything in there but pure olive. And it's completely 100% pesticides free. So I'm thinking it might also have, a relationship with these pesticides. Maybe these pesticides are somewhat degenerating the whole health factor.
Well, first of all, can you ship me a case of that? hook a sister up, okay? I want you to ship me a case. I'll pay for it. But seriously, this is actually something that has crossed my mind as well, which is there's a huge issue with adulteration of olive oil. So
I think that's a good point that Nicholas made. That could be, pesticide exposed, and pesticide do not degrade very biologically speaking. They stay there, and that's one of the risk factors in the Parkinson's disease or tremor.
Right. And well, what I was going to say is that we have an issue here where a lot of it's being cut and diluted, and this happens in Italy as well, where they're cutting it with synthetic vegetable oils, particularly canola oil, which is, in the U.S. we consider that to be this godsend, and more restaurants use that than they do olive oil. Even when they say they're using olive oil, they're still using like a 50-50, and that may have already been cut back, in Italy. So I don't know that Spanish olive oil has the same issue with contamination or kind of making a cheaper quality. But it does seem to be a huge problem in Italy, to the point that they've actually appointed the carabinieri, it's like the meter maids, basically. They're part of the police force, and one of their jobs is to go around smelling olive oil for quality.
Actually, I cook my Indian dishes in olive oil. I don't know how good they are, but there's a whole food store, and
so why don't you use ghee? Why don't you use ghee or coconut oil? Because I just made ghee. I can make ghee. You can make ghee.
Is saturated fat, so ghee I use only in a dal or something, but not cooking.
I see what you're saying.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. One of the things that we're fortunate enough to have here in the islands is macnut oil.
Yeah. So, oh yes.
So I've been using that.
For vacation.
Well, come and see me sometime. Not to sound like Mae West, but.
No, I will. I will give you a call.
Great. Okay, so tell me, are antioxidants always good, or are there times where you want?
It is always, but here, when you go and select antioxidant, many of the preparation of the antioxidant have a iron. You see iron, copper, manganese. These three minerals are absolutely essential for your health.
Yes.
But slight excess can increase the risk of almost all chronic diseases, including Parkinson's disease.
Uh-huh.
And the reason is because when iron or copper or manganese combined with vitamin C, it generates a lot of free radicals.
Mm.
Did you know that? This is as a matter of fact, if you want to study the effect of pure free radicals on a biological system, the one and only way is to add in your test tube iron and vitamin C solution and your target tissue, whatever you are measuring on. Pure free radical. Many agents will produce free radicals, but that's not a pure. There are some other things they produce too. But this is the only way. And in the presence of a antioxidant, iron is absorbed much better, or copper is absorbed much better.
I see.
For example, and then it will increase the iron store or copper store in your body, and that will cause all kind of chronic diseases. Like iron has been known to cause excessive iron in a Parkinson's disease. Copper has been implicated to in a Alzheimer's disease, and so these things. Why you will take in a multiple vitamin preparation that you are taking, you should not take iron, copper, or manganese if it is there. Second, very important thing to remember is sometimes they add also, not sometimes, most often they add heavy metal like vanadium, zirconium, molybdenum. They have no use in the body, and body has no mechanism of excretion of heavy metal, or for that matter, iron, copper, or manganese. So they accumulate. And heavy metal over long-term period, if you are going to take vitamin every day, over long-term period, it is neurotoxic. Mm-hmm. So why you will take this kind of stuff? Unnecessary.
Oh, so anything about Black Sabbath or Iron Maiden, something like that? Any words on these two?
Yeah, well, we'll have to get them on the show to defend their end of the argument. But what I'm actually asking about here with the antioxidants is that my understanding, for example, with a condition like Candida albicans, that you should be, which is considered anaerobic bacteria. I had learned to dose antioxidants separate from the Candida elimination periods. So in other words, when you're dosing things that will help eliminate and excrete the Candida, to time it so that you're doing it away from the antioxidant consumption. Is that something that has crossed your path, that there's certain times where antioxidants maybe don't fit, within a particular therapy?
No, I think it doesn't make difference. As long as you are taking, for example, any multiple vitamin, you take it. And if you take it twice a day, and other medication you can take any time.
Right.
But I don't know whether there is interaction between the two.
Okay.
And the reason we say that take it twice, any kind of multiple vitamin, because the biological half-life in the blood varies depending upon whether it is a fat soluble or water soluble. Yes. It varies. The rate of elimination from your body varies. And what we have demonstrated when I was at the University of Colorado Medical School doing research was that if you just vary a twofold difference in the antioxidant component, the genetic activity alters dramatically. So if you are taking only once a day in the morning, by evening, more than half of them is gone. Next morning, another half is gone.
Right.
And so she changed the genetic activity, saying will be constantly trying to meet the requirement of the level. So in order to maintain the steady level so that your cell doesn't have to worry about changing the genetic activity that rapidly, we recommend that you take twice a day.
Okay.
Half in the morning, same total dose, half in the evening.
Right.
And so, but most of the antioxidant really, Adrian, is very non-toxic except for example, vitamin A. Vitamin A is a, say, 3,000 to 5,000 is recommended. Nowadays, they recommend 3,000 international unit per day. But if you take a 10,000, just double the amount, roughly, then in a pregnant woman, it can cause birth defect. In older individual, it can cause osteoporosis.
Right.
So the safety window for vitamin A is very narrow. Mm-hmm. And so is it for selenium.
Right.
But the rest of the antioxidant or vitamin B, there is no toxicity. Oh, in vitamin B6 is another thing that many people use, they call it a stress tablet.
Right.
They have all vitamin, B vitamin, only B vitamin, 50 milligram or more. And what they have shown, and some people came to me with that condition for consultation, is that if vitamin B6, if you take a 50 milligram or more, after a certain time, you can develop what is called a peripheral neuropathy, which is numbness of extremities.
Right.
And that is reversible once you stop it.
Right. Yeah, a lot of these, especially with the water-soluble vitamins, will reverse if you stop the therapy, if you've gone overboard. Actually, you brought up manganese, and are you aware of the studies that Mark Purdy had done in England on BSE?
No.
Okay, he was an organic farmer, and his path was that there was an issue with warblefly, which lives in the stomach of cattle. And so this is my understanding, at least. And you can Google his name, Purdy, Purdy. But basically they were requiring all farmers in the UK to put this organophosphate at almost like a lotion on the back of the cattle. And he and the other organic farmers said, no, we can't do that because then we can't be organic. And so they went to court, fought for their right to not have to put it because their herds were not in danger of this warblefly. Long story short, the cattle that did the organophosphate did get BSE. The ones who didn't get BSE. As you know, BSE is a neurological disorder, and what ended up happening is he ended up going around the world, Japan, Czech Republic, all these different places, found out that he found manganese exposure as a common thread between all the different forms of BSE in cattle, deer, sheep, etc. And he was seeing that high manganese exposure was causing these neurological issues. But are these all just manifestations of Parkinson's that we're seeing varying?
Neurological, is a kind of Parkinsonism, may not be a classical in the animal.
Exactly.
Many Parkinson's disease appear different symptoms. But manganese are known, for example, manganese miners, who works with the manganese mine in Chile and other South American countries. And I don't know, in our country here, we have manganese mines. Maybe in old days we had. But anybody who works there miner, they have very high incidence of Parkinson's disease.
Right. And, actually, I remember Scrapie, I guess, is one of the names for it. And in Colorado here, what he found, they had a scare about deer having Scrapie. And what he found out when he went to research it was that these so-called hunters, they were kind of doing the Dick Cheney canned hunt, right? So they went out out into nature, but instead of just actually hunting, they would put out these salt blocks that were high in manganese. And the salt would attract the deer, and they would be licking on it, and that's when they would shoot them. So, he found found that connection in all of these animals, from chickens to, like I said, deer and sheep, etc., throughout the world. So now you have a section in your book about reducing the risk.
Yes.
And in addition to things like vitamin E and nuts and oils, many of which are high in vitamin E, you also have cigarettes, ibuprofen, and caffeine. So should I mean, I've got a coffee. Should I just light up?
No, I would not. I wrote also that I would not recommend that.
Okay.
But there have been some epidemiology study. Epidemiology study, as you know, Adrian, is a survey type study.
Right.
I don't rely on that. And there is no intervention study showing that these things work, either high level of caffeine or the other things. So I wouldn't recommend smoking.
Okay. I just know, but I can see some people saying like, well, there's a risk of Parkinson's in my family. So I have to smoke. So we're not going to rely on that.
I have made a specific point that I would not recommend that. Or, even though caffeine is a small amount of caffeine is important for you, but not the kind of 5-6 cups that people drink every day.
Right, exactly. Especially when they couple that with the fake creamer and 9 teaspoons of sugar per cup. Okay. All right. So, Nick, do you have any other questions?
Wait, I'm still processing that coffee part. Will it kill me or not?
Just have one.
Yes, I just have one.
Nicholas, you can have a few cups, no question. But don't take 10 cups.
Okay. Actually, I have another question about the minerals, because we already discussed that certain minerals can be toxic. Are there any other minerals, or is it just, should we just not focus on supplementing minerals in these cases? Is it just the naturally occurring minerals in our water supply, in our food?
Exactly. I would not supplement mineral at all. And, anytime you have a little bit of salad, anything which grow under the ground, people take something once a day, some salad or something, even a few times a week. That's enough mineral for you.
Oh, okay. Good to know. So what is a good game plan for someone who's getting, they've got, whether it's the relative that they're taking care of, and actually that's my bookkeeper, her husband actually has Parkinson's, and this actually dovetails with her question that she has for you, which is, she would simply like to know what type of diet he should be consuming. High protein? Are there any no-nos? We're leaning more towards convenience.
No, I think protein is just the balanced diet, which is, low fat, high fiber diet, fresh fruits and vegetables, and meat, fish, whatever you like. I don't too much restriction on diet, except don't take high fat, high caloric diet.
Right.
Vegetarian could be high caloric diet too.
This is true too.
And high caloric diet generates a lot of free radicals.
Right, exactly. And the last episode, we had a doctor of Chinese medicine, and we were talking about the fact that people who do slightly restrict their caloric intake tend to have better life outcomes overall. Slightly, because sometimes diet restriction that people did in an animal study, like they will recommend 800 calories a day. No, that's ridiculous. Yeah.
Yeah, right. But if you reduce, you just take a smaller amount. You don't have to take big amount.
Right.
But I don't, have a meditation, relaxed lifestyle is very important. Do yoga.
If he's losing weight, he's slowly losing weight. Is that something that she should be concerned with?
No. And I think if he has active Parkinson disease, I would suggest some multiple vitamins. I can send you things that I think you should take it.
Okay.
Through email.
Okay.
And then people who are taking that kind of a program. Actually, my neighbor has Parkinson disease, and he's doing extremely well.
That's fantastic. What is your number one tip for anyone who has either recently been diagnosed or otherwise, wants to have a better outcome. They don't want this to be a death sentence. They don't want to have no hope. And I really think that's the crux of what you're giving people here, which is hope to kind of, do more than just let it ravage their bodies, but to really rail against it.
Take one multiple vitamins. In addition to that, take a curcumin, 100 milligram, resveratrol, 100 milligram, nicotinamide, 100 milligram, coenzyme Q10, 50 milligram, and omega-3 fatty acid, 1,000 milligram.
Wow. Okay.
And I will send you the information to your email. And in case other people ask, you can provide that information, more specific one.
Well, thank you very much. Yeah, we'll make it available for people on our site. One of the things that I was going to say, the multivitamin, any particular, we know that the extra iron, for example, may not be good for a lot of these people. Right. Is there something, a particular...
There is one company that I developed a formulation for them. And their website is Engage Global, ENGAGE, EngageGlobal.com.
Okay.
And they have a formulation called MMF. In short, it is called Military Micronutrient Formulation that we tested in Marine Corps and Marines in training and so on.
All right. Fantastic. That's thank you so much for that information, because I think that will give people a good place to start, because there are a lot of these conditions that many of us just are led to believe that it's hopeless and that we can't do anything. And, to me, I'm the type of person who I would rather try and fail than to never have tried at all and live in regret.
Me too. Exactly.
Well, thank you so much for joining us. Do you have a website now?
No, I don't have my personal website, no.
Well, you're going to have to get one and let us know about it.
Yeah, maybe I will. I don't have personal website. I will give you my email. You have my email, right? So
yes. And you know what? I just realized I did not tell people the name of your book. Can you give everybody the name of your book so that they can... Yeah.
It's called Fight Parkinson's and Huntington Disease with Vitamins and Antioxidant. And it is available from Amazon.com.
Fantastic. So that's Fight Parkinson's and Huntington's Disease with Vitamins and Antioxidants. Fantastic.
And it is available, as I said, on Amazon.com.
Well, Dr. Prsad, thank you so much for being with us, and thank you for enlightening us about this very, very important topic. And I wish I had run across your work sooner. Although, like I said, my mother-in-law, poor thing, she was they quite literally scared the pants off of her as far as doing something more on the health side, because they said, you don't know what you're going to get. And I'm like, you might get better, So, it was pretty tragic, because she was never able to enjoy her grandchildren, for example, because she kind of went into essentially a vegetative state a little over 10 years ago. So, and then last year she I don't know, fortunately or unfortunately died from the disease. So, but thank you so much for your contribution, and we really appreciate you being with us, and hopefully we'll have you on the show again.
Thank you, Adrina. It's my pleasure.
Thanks.
The Nutrition Heretic Podcast is a production of Savor the Journey, LLC. Our audio editor is Nikola Popovich. Our podcast manager is Crystal McLean, and our operations manager is Linda Hansen. I'm your host, Adrian Hugh, the Nutrition Heretic. You can find us at nutritionheretic.com, where you can download the Nutrition Heretic's free shit list of 7 health foods to avoid like the plague. You can also listen to previous episodes at nutritionheretic.com/podcast. Be sure to like us on social media for updates. Our Facebook page is facebook.com/nutritionheretic and on Twitter at NutriHeretic. Contact us with show ideas, questions, or if you just want to be a guest. And don't forget to rate our podcast on iTunes and Stitcher. Thanks.